These were the police doing their job, and you saw a snowflake professor screaming, "Hey, I'm a professor," as if that's supposed to mean something. And the knight in shining armor, that guy screaming, "You're a fascist, you're a fascist," didn't lift a finger to help her, but he did a really good job of screaming, "You're a fascist, you're a fascist."
Well, these college protests continued to get bigger and louder and uglier and violent in some cases. But in Texas and in Georgia, well, the police had different marching orders. Take a look at this scene from Emory University in Georgia.
Get on. Yeah. Get on. Get on the ground. Get on the ground. Oh my God. Oh my God. Give me some cops. Come on, you can head. Oh my God. Oh my God. You be more fascist. You are Hitler. You are a laughing dog. Shame on you. May you never live another day.
I am a professor.
This is an Emory professor, everyone.
I am a professor of economics.
You're rabid dogs.
I don't mean to laugh, but there's something about screaming, "I am a professor of economics," while you're getting handcuffed by the police. That just sort of seems sort of funny to me. Beverly, listen, again, back to the question of, because you work in media training and media imagery communications, when that imagery is played over and over and over again, see, I look at it through my perspective, the cops are the good guys there. Yeah. But does this have a deteriorating effect on those of us who do want law and order on these campuses?
You do have to be careful. Now, apparently, yeah, if you're a professor of economics, it's your get out of jail free card for some reason. I'm not sure how that applies to resisting arrest.
I'm a professor of economics.
Apparently, a professor is the most noble thing they can think of these days on the left, which is not too surprising. But there is an optic element of this. Now, this, as you were saying, was on Emory campus. When you look at what took place in Texas, you saw the riot gear that police wore. I actually was against that optically. It's not going to benefit in these little snippets. It's not going to benefit the police to see that. I understand we want them to be protected, but here's what you have with social media. When you have a TikTok, Instagram, fill in the blank of whatever, they're going to take these 10 to 15 second clips, take it out of context, not show that these police officers probably talked to this professor many times before it got to this point. And so, yes, this is going to be used to try to show that the police are in the wrong, that the right is in the wrong, these horrible red states are in the wrong. And so, yes, there is an optic challenge with social media. And by the way, that's not what we had decades ago when these protests were started for different reasons. You didn't have these little snippets in social media. So it's a different ball game.
Yeah. But Andy, listen, people watch the protests go on. What are the two optics games here? You let the dirtbags take over the campus, put their tents up, scream horrific anti-Semitic things to innocent Jewish students who were there. And of course, your thought process is send in the police and get them out of there. Well, this is what this looks like when you send in the police to get them out of there. So what's a better optic, really?
Our membership is a 50-plus demographic. They remember Kent State. They remember college protests. They also support the rule of law. And I don't think our membership would have absolutely any problem with what you just showed. These were the police doing their job, and you saw a snowflake professor screaming, "Hey, I'm a professor," as if that's supposed to mean something. And the knight in shining armor, that guy screaming, "You're a fascist, you're a fascist," didn't lift a finger to help her, but he did a really good job of screaming, "You're a fascist, you're a fascist." The optics here are what they are, and they're going to try and weaponize them against the police. But AMAC, and AMAC members are firm and staunch supporters of the rule of law, and that's what's needed here. Welcome to Georgia. You're going to come down here and do that? Well, that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to have to answer to the police and be held accountable for your actions. And to Beverly's point, we don't know how many times that professor was warned, but it's reasonable to think that she was. So what we saw was actually not an unreasonable optic.
Well, yeah, and listen, again, you comply with the police order. The police said, get on the ground. She wouldn't go on the ground. He put her on the ground. But Akash, your organization, Americans for Prosperity, I first knew about you because you were so important in helping the Tea Party movement and giving support to people who were protesting in the early days of the Obama administration about the unbelievable and unwarranted spending. There were a lot of protests there. The thing about the Tea Party is it was all peaceful, it was all rule of law, and we left a place cleaner than we found it, right?
That's exactly right. I'm sure many of the folks watching this show were part of those protests, right? There were thousands of people at some of these rallies, but it was never violent. It was never anything like that. And I think, as Beverly and Andy pointed out, the context matters here. We have no idea how many times this lady was warned. I laugh. I believe the person holding the camera was shouting that the police are Hitler in this instance, which for pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters who are celebrating the slaughter of Jews to be alleging that somebody else is Hitler is pretty interesting. But
there's no irony on the left when they're dealing with things like that. There's no sense of self-awareness.
But again, I think all of the context here matters, and that's what we as conservatives have to make sure that people are aware of, right? And Beverly made this point, which is that optically people are going to draw conclusions from 15-second segments. But again, Governor Kemp in Georgia, Governor Abbott in Texas, Speaker Johnson, these conservative leaders have long championed free speech. AFP has worked with all of them. Every single one of these people that we just mentioned, AFP has worked in states at the federal level. Our activists have partnered with them to promote and protect free speech on college campuses. These are the same places that criminalize hate speech and all these other things. And so protecting free speech is important. But when that protest crosses a line into violence and threats, then this kind of thing is justified.
And if I could, Akash, I believe you've also worked with Governor DeSantis in Florida, as well as the president of University of Florida, former Senator Ben Sasse. So take a look at this letter that was handed out to protesters when the encampments began on the University of Florida. And I'll read it out to you. It's very clear. It says allowable activities, speech, expressing viewpoints, holding signs in hands. Then it gives a list of the prohibited activities, including amplified sounds, demonstrations inside buildings, littering, camping, sleeping, unmanned signs, blocking areas. It got basically everything that we're seeing up in Columbia and Yale. And then the most important part at the bottom, consequences for non-compliance. Individuals found responsible for engaging in prohibited activities shall be trespassed from campus. Students will receive a 3-year trespass and suspension. Employees will be trespassed and separated from employment. Right back to you, Akash. That Ben Sasse is the president of University of Florida, and of course, that's under the oversight of Governor Ron DeSantis. That's how you do it. That's what we expect. That's normal. That's how you run a civilization.
Not just a civilization, but specifically a college campus. And Ben Sasse has been absolutely phenomenal at the University of Florida, doing the things that make a college campus what it's supposed to be, a place of free expression, of exploration, of learning, of people having dissenting opinions. That's exactly what being great on this issue looks like from Ben Sasse. I think that's a model for other universities, and frankly, for professors and others that are participating in these protests as well, that there is an opportunity to be heard if you go about it the right way and respect the rights of others.
Beverly, this was the dominant story this week. And I think when all is said and done, it doesn't help the Democrats. It doesn't help Joe Biden. Will this be the dominant story going into next week? Or do you think that the powers that be are starting to say, yeah, this needs to end?
I think it's going to slow down a lot. The question is, will MSNBC and CNN cover it, or is it just going to be Fox? But I even had a thought about this. Let's say you were a USC student. Your freshman year, you didn't get to have a normal freshman year because of COVID.
Yeah.
Maybe you had to stay home and watch on a screen. Now your commencement is ruined because of these protests. If you're a student in Florida, you didn't have any of this. It was a very, very different experience. And so I do think you have these parents, again, regardless of how they vote, they don't want this for their kids. But these protests are taking place on college campuses because this is where the very progressive left has got its start and has grown, and that is where they're taking it. But I do think that they have gone too far, and we're going to see the pendulum swing more in the other direction.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Andy, my daughter asked, she's a college graduate, but she asked me literally yesterday on the phone, she's considering going to graduate school. And she said, Yale has a really good program. And I said, you know what? Ask me next week, because this is not the week to ask me that. And I don't think I'm alone. I think people really are second guessing the whole idea of sending kids to colleges like this, if this is what it looks like.
Not only with what's going on with these protests and how out of control and how the lack of leadership from these university administrators, but there's the college bubble may have burst when you're looking at some employers looking at the value of a college education. And I say that with 2 college students, as I mentioned before. The trades are screaming for good people. You walk out with 0 college debt and a skill that you could use for the rest of your life. So you pile on this issue with what's going on in college campuses. And you're absolutely right with regard to Yale. I mean, I don't know if we did an informal poll just for the people that we're talking with here today on your podcast, but like, how impressed are you when you learn somebody went to Yale or Columbia or Harvard or Princeton or Cornell? We really have to call into question the kind of product that these so-called elite universities have been producing for the last 20 years.
Yeah. It's like the old game of life. Remember when you spin it and then you decide to go to college or you take the career path? I should have been a car mechanic.